You write really beautifully about a friend you lost, that you have loved forever and ever and ever, and felt despair around an inability to connect with him in moments that you wouldn't mind telling me a bit about him.
Sure. So here I am writing a book on how to know a person. And my oldest friend in the world, Peter Marks, who we've known since we were 11.
Yeah.
Our whole friendship was based on play. We, like at age 11 or age 57, we just played basketball. If we were eating, we would play with the food. It was always just play. We just played. And he was a beautiful marriage, wonderful kids, successful surgeon, outwardly a seemingly great life. And he would have said, I have a great life, luckiest guy in the world. Then at age 57, depression just, boom, it hits him. And we noticed it immediately, like we were going up to play basketball with him and suddenly the light was out. And so I was supposed to be good at knowing how to connect with people, but I was unfamiliar with how to deal with a friend who's in severe depression. And so I did the mistakes. And so one of the mistakes was, you have a great life. And so I learned later, like, if you're telling someone they should be enjoying what they're not palpably enjoying, you're just like showing you don't get it. It makes them feel worse because, I have a great life, I should be enjoying it.
Yeah.
But I said, you used to go to Vietnam and you would do these cataract surgeries. You found them tremendously rewarding. I wanted to go do that. And I later learned giving people advice on how to get out of depression, again, just another sign you don't get it. And so the only thing I found I could do was just be present, just show up constantly, and I'm sticking around. And then maybe the only useful thing I did was give him a video from another friend of mine who'd suffered from depression, a guy named Mike Gerson. And Mike had very bravely done a National Cathedral sermon on this.
Yeah. And
he described his own depression. And he described depression as a malfunction in the machine we use to perceive reality. And that Pete resonated with that I'm misperceiving reality. And I've got these obsessive, compulsive voices in my head that are lying to me. You're of no value. No one would miss you if you're gone. But I think especially in the beginning of the 3 years he suffered from that depression, I didn't know enough about depression to know what he was doing. I did not know that if you have been lucky enough not to suffer from depression, you cannot understand it by extrapolating from your moments of sadness.
Yeah.
It's different. Yeah. And I did not know what to say. And we make our living with words.
Yes.
And words are supposed to be able to help us solve problems, and words were useless. And so it was just a slow education in how to show up. And it was not, that story does not have a happy ending. He took his life in April of 2022 after fighting courageously and bravely against this beast for 3 years.
Yeah.
But part of the process of getting to know someone or getting to know people is not only knowing them at their high moments, but sitting with them in moments of suffering, and being present, just showing that you're there.
Yeah.
And it may not help. And his wife's love and their boy's love for him poured forth in this time. And he had great experts helping him.
Yeah.
But the beast was just bigger than all of us. Yeah. And we went to dinner like 3 days before he took his life. And, you're trying to reach him. And it's just hard. And apparently on the ride home was heart-wrenching. He was like, you guys can talk to each other, I can't. And so you get that sense of the isolation he was feeling. Yeah. But it was, as I say, it was a very hard lesson in seeing someone.
Yes.
The mind, there's a John Milton phrase, the mind can make heaven of hell or hell of heaven. The mind is its own place.
Yeah, that's right.
And, he was just experiencing brutal pain in ways that didn't have any obvious corollaries to the world that I was seeing. Yeah. And I guess one lesson is when I'm talking to you or I'm talking to Pete when he was depressed, I'm not looking at him, I'm looking at your subjectivity.
Yes, that's
how you're experiencing this moment.
Yeah.
And it could be radically different. And if I really want to know you,
yeah,
I've got to not know your objective realities of your life. but how are you experiencing your experience?
Yeah.
I would say one other thing to anybody who might be feeling sad, and this is a message I try to get across to people. I don't know this for a fact, but I believe at the end, on his final day, Pete was under the impression he was doing his family a favor by saying they'll be rid of the pain and cost. And having seen the wreckage,
Yes.
if you ever think that's wrong, that is completely wrong. So stick around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry?
Lovey. My dad was very depressed when I was growing up, and the feeling of being close to the light that is dimming is it's hard to stay up right next to the wall.
Yeah. What do you mean the light that was dimming in
You know,
his mind?
like in there, he was incredibly depressed. It only got worse. It only got worse. It only got worse, and he just retracts into this shell of aversion, and then just to stay up really close to somebody who's suffering and their personality is erased, and his depression is such a vicious thing.
Yeah.
That description of that as perception altering, and like the things we have control of when we're trying to know and love the people in our life.
Right.
Because what you're describing is such an intense example of the limits of our ability to control whether other people can know how much we love them and want to see them. And
there were no words that could penetrate what he was going through.
Yeah.
Or they would penetrate it, but like there were two of him. There was the one who was suffering and then the one who was observing the suffering.
Yeah.
And so you could talk to the one who was observing, and he understood it intellectually, but he just didn't feel it.
Yes.
And, I think that's one of my big takeaways. There's a theory called constructionism, that we all construct our own reality. And that we don't see with our eyes, we see with our whole life.
Yeah.
And
we see with our whole life.
Yeah. And so, if you're an introvert, you see a different room than an extrovert.
Yeah.
If you're a security specialist, you see a different room than a home decorator.
Yeah.
But if you have been wounded, then you see a threatening experience where somebody else doesn't see a threatening. And so you've always got to, that's why after that power of attention, that's why conversation is so important. Because we have this thing, I can take your perspective. No, you can't. You have to ask. You have to say, what are you seeing here? What are you experiencing here? And you have to walk through that conversation. And it looks like opening our eyes.
Yeah.
You just open your eyes and you see the world. It feels like the light comes in.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Your brain is projecting out models based on past experience.
Yeah, I really didn't like that study that you were describing that was like, how much do you think that you see the world correctly?
Yeah.
Do you think, and you're like, you think 80%. And it was like 20%
Yeah.
of your perception is reality.
Yeah.
It's so funny because it's one of the only places in which, because I'm a really sensitive person, being able to try to guess other people's emotions has been really key to me trying to figure out, what to know and be in the world.
Yeah. So I have this thing that empathy is 3 separate skills. So the first skill is mirroring, and that's really like catching an emotion.
Yeah.
And then the second is mentalizing. I have a theory based on some past experience what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And then the third is caring. So being like, we can say a con man is empathetic. They know what other people are feeling. They just don't care.
Yeah. For me, in our ridiculous friendship, one of the things I've liked about it is when I'm feeling not my shiniest self. Like, you're fun to be shiny with because we can argue and talk about books and whatever. But I remember one morning I was just feeling kind of a little bit terrible. And I texted you and Anne and we're like, can I just come over in basically glorified pajamas? And then like 20 minutes later, I'm at your house, great coffee. And then
I had put on a suit, I think. No.
You're like, I was wearing a tux, a top and tail. And then we all just mostly told embarrassing stories.
Yeah.
And I have to say that was one of my loveliest
Good.
mornings.
Good.
So thank you for being the friend who's willing to see people in their shiniest and in their less shiny. It really, is a gift.
I used to think, I felt I was being a burden on my friends. But now when somebody asks me when they're going through something, I'm so honored. And so the lesson was you're never being a burden, or almost never. You should never. If they're your friend, it should never be a burden.
Well, David, I liked who you were, but I also love who you are. Thanks for being a great friend and for writing a beautiful piece that all of us can follow.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed our friendship. I've enjoyed your podcast, and now I get to be on your podcast as a friend and a podcastee.